The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, and the entire room fell silent. Chinedu stood there, water still dripping from his worn shirt, as Mrs. Okafor's face twisted with rage. She had just thrown her drink at him in front of 200 guests at her daughter's engagement party. "How dare a filthy gateman like you walk through the front entrance?" she screamed, her jewelry glinting under the crystal chandeliers. "You track your poverty into my home like it's nothing." Chinedu said nothing. He simply reached into his old jacket pocket and pulled out a brown envelope. His hands were steady, his eyes calm. Mr. Okafor, the wealthy businessman who owned half the commercial buildings in Lagos, pushed through the crowd of shocked guests. "What is this nonsense?" Mr. Okafor demanded, snatching the envelope from Chinedu's hand. "Security, remove this man immediately." But as Mr. Okafor's eyes scanned the documents inside, his face went completely white. The paper slipped from his trembling fingers. His wife rushed forward, picking up the scattered pages, and what she saw made her stumble backward. Their daughter Adana, the bride-to-be, grabbed one of the documents. Her scream pierced through the silence. "This can't be real," Mr. Okafor whispered, his voice barely audible. "This is impossible." Chinedu finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. 23 years ago, you made a choice that destroyed my family. Today, you will learn the truth about everything you own." The guests pressed closer, their phones out, recording every second. Mrs. Okafor's legs gave way, and she collapsed into a chair, still clutching the documents that were shaking in her hands. "These buildings, this house, your cars, your businesses," Chinedu continued, his eyes never leaving Mr. Okafor's face. "None of it was ever." 3 years earlier, Chinedu had arrived at the Okafor mansion with nothing but a small bag and a letter of recommendation from a distant cousin. He needed work desperately. His clothes were old but clean, his shoes worn but polished. When Mrs. Okafor opened the gate that morning, she looked him up and down with disgust. "We need a gateman," she said coldly. "You'll sleep in the boys' quarters, eat after the family, and never use the front entrance. Your salary is 30,000 naira a month. Take it or leave it." Chinedu took it. He had no choice. His mother was sick in the village, and his younger siblings needed school fees. Every night, he slept on a thin mattress in a room barely big enough to stand in. Every morning, he woke up at 5 to open the gate for the Okafor family's expensive cars. The family treated him like he was invisible. When they spoke to him at all, it was with insults. "Useless man," Mr. Okafor would say, when Chinedu was seconds late opening the gate. "You're lucky to even have this job." Their daughter Adana would laugh with her friends, making jokes about the poor gateman who probably couldn't even read. But Chinedu watched everything. He watched how Mr. Okafor conducted his business meetings in the garden, how he bragged about his properties to visitors. He watched Mrs. Okafor show off her imported furniture and designer clothes to her society friends. He listened to every word, remembered every detail. One afternoon, 6 months into his employment, Chinedu overheard Mr. Okafor on the phone. "Yes, the Ademola properties are finally fully transferred to my name," Mr. Okafor was saying, his voice filled with satisfaction. "After 23 years, no one can trace anything back to that family. They're all gone anyway." Chinedu's blood ran cold. Ademola was his family name, his father's name. He pressed himself against. For 2.5 years, Chinedu played his role perfectly. He bowed his head when they shouted at him. He said yes, sir, and yes, ma, even when they called him worthless. But every free moment he was working. He befriended an old clerk named Musa, who had worked at the land registry office for 40 years. Musa remembered Chinedu's father, a kind businessman who had trusted his partner, Joseph Okafor. Over bottles of malt and plates of rice, Musa told Chinedu everything. How Mr. Okafor had made his father sign papers on his deathbed, claiming they were medical forms. How those papers actually transferred everything to Okafor's name. "Your father was poisoned," Musa whispered one evening, his eyes full of regret. "I knew it then, but I was afraid." Okafor was powerful, had connections everywhere. "I kept copies of the original documents, though. Hidden them all these years," waiting for someone from your family to come looking. Chinedu also found his father's old lawyer, Barrister Nwosu, now retired and bitter. I tried to fight it, the old man said, tears in his eyes. But Okafor bribed the judge, threatened my family. I had to drop the case. Your mother was forced to sign away her rights just to keep you children safe. I've lived with that shame ever since. Document by document, testimony by testimony, Chinedu built his case. He found the original business registration papers showing his father owned 60% of their partnership. He found hospital records that showed traces of poison in his father's blood, records that had mysteriously disappeared from official files, but that a sympathetic doctor had kept. He found witnesses who had been too afraid to speak 23 years ago, but were now willing to testify. At the mansion, the Okafors planned their daughter's elaborate engagement party. They invited governors, business moguls, celebrities. Mrs. Okafor spent millions on decorations. This will be the event of the year, she boasted to her friends. Everyone who is anyone will be here. Chinedu listened and watched, knowing this party would indeed be unforgettable, just not in the way they imagined. The night before the party, Mrs. Okafor found him sweeping the driveway. You disgust me, she spat. Tomorrow we have important guests. I don't want to see your dirty face anywhere near the police arrived within 30 minutes, but not to arrest Chinedu. Barrister Nwosu had already filed the case in court that morning, and the officers came with a warrant. Mr. Okafor tried to run, but his legs wouldn't carry him. He collapsed into a chair, aged 20 years in 20 minutes. You were just a boy, Mr. Okafor whispered, staring at Chinedu. How did you even know? My father kept a diary, Chinedu said. My mother gave it to me before she died last year. He wrote everything, including his suspicions about you in his final days. But he never imagined his partner, his best friend, would actually kill him. The guests recorded everything on their phones. By morning, the story was everywhere. News channels, blogs, social media. The mighty Okafor family brought down by the Gateman they had mocked and mistreated. The court case moved quickly. With all of Chinedu's evidence, Moose's testimony, and the original documents, there was no defense. Mr. Okafor was sentenced to 15 years in prison for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to murder. All properties were returned to their rightful owner, Chinedu Ademola. Mrs. Okafor and Adana were evicted from the mansion. They moved into a small flat in a modest neighborhood, the same type of place they used to mock. Adana's fiancé broke off the engagement immediately. After all, he had wanted to marry wealth, not scandal. 6 months later, Chinedu stood in his father's office, now restored with his father's name on the door, Ademola and Sons Enterprises. He had hired back many of the workers his father once employed. He found his younger siblings in the village and brought them to Lagos, enrolled them in the best schools. One morning, there was a knock at his office door. It was Mrs. Okafor. She looked different now, humble, tired, wearing simple clothes instead of designer labels. Adana stood behind her, eyes downcast. We came to beg forgiveness, Mrs. Okafor said quietly. We were wicked to you. We didn't know, but even if we had known, it wouldn't excuse how we treated you. Chinedu studied them for a long moment. He thought about all the insults, the humiliation, the night sleeping on that thin mattress while they lived in luxury stolen from his family. But he also thought about his father, who his mother always said had a kind heart. My father believed in second chances, Chinedu finally said. He would want me to show mercy. I'll give you both jobs in the company, entry-level positions. You'll work hard, earn your keep fairly. But you'll be treated with respect, something you never gave me. Mrs. Okafor's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. We don't deserve this. No, you don't, Chinedu agreed. But maybe that's what makes it the right thing to do. As they left, Chinedu looked at his father's photograph on the wall. Justice had taken 23 years, but it had finally come. His family's name was restored. And he had learned something important. True wealth isn't about money or buildings or fancy cars. It's about dignity, integrity, and how you treat people, especially those who seem to have nothing. Now, before we end, I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone being mistreated because of their position, only for the truth to